Cool. Welcome back to another episode. In this one, we want to break it down and be super authentic. There are challenges that every business faces. There are problems every day that you have to figure out and things to solve. And I think this is an interesting opportunity for us to take some of the things that we're learning in this space of, voice and AI. And this is such a greenfield space. I think a lot of people are like, AI has been around forever, but like you've mentioned in previous videos that AI voice really has just kind of come out in the end of 2024 in like this newest iteration. And so
That's
you
right.
can touch on that if you want to, but more importantly, I think we're finding, there's a couple companies that do what we do. And what I want to do is I want to talk about what are some of the challenges going on in this space. And I want to give potential customers, other entrepreneurs, a glimpse into how we think about these problems so they can kind of better understand how Insta is being led, some of the mission and vision of the company, and just some of the challenges of, that exist in this AI voice space. So Mike, lead us off with like, what's going on? What's happening? What are some of the challenges? How is it fun? What are you learning?
Yeah. So I would say number one, it's definitely fun. This is definitely the wild, wild west period of everything AI voice related with the APIs. And so the fun part about that is companies are releasing new features and new models very, very quickly, throwing it out there into the wild without a lot of, testing that typically takes months and months. So the cool thing is it's really exciting. Everyone's pretty much pressing the release button and pretty much putting you right to their beta program by upgrading your models, things like that right away. And so from a building perspective, right? Because we are doing AI voice screening services. So we're really orchestrating. Let's just kind of break down what services we're actually orchestrating here, because it's pretty complex under the hood when you really look at it, right? So you've got 3 or 4 main systems that kind of roll up into this orchestration, right? You've got, let's talk about the first one, right?
When you say orchestration, can we talk about that? Because I think some viewers that are more lay people, or
Yeah.
maybe someone's a contractor, or they have a
Yeah.
restaurant and they're watching this and they want AI voice assistance, but like it's hard to understand what orchestration means. I do because you've explained it to me now. But talk to us
So for,
about.
yeah. So for clients, right, and for customers, it just works. It's out of the box. It just works. They pretty much all they're really interacting with is, what do I want my voice assistant to actually say? What questions? What's the personality? What's the background information that I need to upload so that the voice assistant can answer questions, things like that. But underneath the hood, where Insta plays in, right? What we're actually building is, well, what I like to call orchestration of all this call technology. And orchestration, think about it just in the terms of, if you went to an orchestra, right? You've got people that are playing all different instruments. They're all coming together with a conductor. And, you and I are kind of the conductors right now of bringing these different services together. And what are those services, right? So for Insta the first service that we have is text, right? So we've got Twilio. That's been around for a long time. Have had no issues with that. It's pretty stable at this point, right? Of sending an SMS out and also using that for voiceover calls. But the next thing is, once you do get an applicant or a prospect on the phone, right? The first service that we have to interact with is the model, right? Which is basically reading the applicant's words right away, and then it's translating that into what the next part of the process is going to do. So let's talk about the first part of the process. First part of the process is called speech to text, right? And so that is basically the applicant saying hello, right? I have to then convert that, transcribe that, and convert that into words that then, so that is what is called SST, STT, speech to text. That's the first model that we have, first dependency. Okay.
Can
There's
I
a bunch of,
ask
yeah,
a question on that?
sure.
So sorry to interrupt, but I am curious, like how you get this to work so well, because a lot of times we come in, especially for these higher volume roles, or for some of the situations where you have a service like a contractor, a restaurant, a service-based business that wants to use Insta. A lot of times you have people calling in and their accent, maybe English is their second language or 10th,
Mhm.
and it's a little bit hard to understand what they're saying. How does this portion, the text to speech, like how does it I've watched it and it's surprisingly, alarmingly good at even understanding people with heavy, heavy accents. How is that something you do? Is that something that's out of the box with our service providers? How does that work and why is it so good?
So it's not exactly out of the box. However, we've got a buffet of options underneath the hood at which we can select from. So just like say if you were repairing a car where you can basically choose many options for different parts that you want. And it's just really it's a matter of your preference, what providers you like, what do you trust, things like that, right? To handle your car underneath the hood. Same way for this. So there are multiple options, but where this becomes really time intense, Perry, is number one, it's not just a simple, like when you're doing QA testing for voice services, you really have to test each of these components in isolation because it's the orchestra. It's all the instruments coming together.
Oh,
So otherwise it becomes what we know as, and in product as a multivariate test. And then it's
yeah.
really difficult to know what is actually excelling and what
Whoa.
is failing.
So
So
now, wait, now I understand why you haven't been sleeping well because so you have, if I understand
probably the Red
correctly,
Bull, but
we've only talked about one pillar of these four pieces of the orchestration. And now you have people, these company service providers that we're doing business with, right? And bringing them all together into this one solution. They're testing different versions and they're releasing stuff constantly. Within
they
that,
are. They're, let me just note on that. So, because we just experienced a pretty big shift, right, Perry? We just had to change a voice that was extremely stable since I released this thing on Halloween up until March 3rd, according to the data. And then the other API, which is text to speech, right? So one AI basically takes speech to text, has to transcribe the applicant's words through those heavy accents. You got Medicaid commercials on in the background. You've got dogs barking. You've got all this stuff, right? You got the radio on. Some people are taking calls on their way to their job or just in a crowded room. So you got speech to text that needs to translate into that then gets passed off to what we're currently using right now is OpenAI. Everyone's familiar with ChatGPT, OpenAI, right? So then we're taking the transcription, basically, then taking it into OpenAI and basically saying, based on what this person just said, how would a assistant with the preferences that you set up in Insta here, how should they respond, right? And it looks at things like the call script and it looks at all these other settings underneath the hood, like the personality, how the temperature settings, like how authentic that they should be or how wild that they should be, how emotional that this person
10
should
out
be.
of 10.
Yeah, if I could go through it, it's like not only do you have each of these three core providers, but you have a list of settings underneath, and each one can be very different. And with the latest model releases that they just did, for example, we use Play HT. They just went from Play 2.0 Turbo to Play Dialogue, and Play Dialogue essentially is supposed to be the latest and greatest, super fluid. They can talk multiple languages, like just like that. However, something happened underneath the hood where I didn't even upgrade the model to Play Dialogue because I don't upgrade models. I usually let that stuff bake out into the marketplace a little bit and have everyone else find out the problems. However, they did something to change the pass settings on Play Turbo, where all of a sudden the voice assistant that we had started making very strange inflections, like wonderful, like things that were really, really awkward, hard for me to even listen to on the call. And I was like, I didn't change any of my model preferences underneath the hood. All of a sudden, this just changed, right? So you've got to be, number one is like, you have to be aware of like all of the updates that are coming out because, I subscribe to a lot of emails, but I really have to look and see. And not even look and see, even if I read it, I still need to really have a QA testing it, making sure the quality is good. That change came out on a Saturday. I didn't catch it until Sunday night. And I can tell you, I didn't sleep really well that Sunday night because I was like scrambling to figure out what changed. And I upgraded the model and it still didn't fix it. So now you've got like, well, how is that model playing with the next model, which is transcribing the words, right, to what the person is saying? That model is something that's possible to change, right? So you've seen some of the transcriptions from some of our calls. Some of the stuff is just not accurate, even though they purport 90% accurate. And it's going to get better over time, right? It's pretty good right now. I would say it's very good right now. However, things like, how did you hear about this job? And it says the applicant might say Indeed very clearly. The transcription will say immediately, or something that's like not like similar, but not the right thing. So those are 1 and 2. And then the third part is the speech, is the text to speech. And that's Gen, what you know is Gen. That's another buffet of options where you have all the voices that you can now select, which really is the personality of the product. It's the personality of Instagram. And it really comes down to your client's preferences, right? Like this week, when that all happened, I went to another voice provider, who actually, I think the quality of the voice provider themselves, I'm not going to name them right now because I like these people a lot. They gave us a lot of credits to use, and I need to spend a lot more time going through their voice library to find the right voice. But the voice I happened to pick in a really quick effort to replace Jen with the crazy inflections happened to sound a little bit more, it sounded really like a real person, but sounded like a little bit kind of like a stoner, a little bit chilled out, like not necessarily like most enthusiastic person that's selling you on working for this company that we're doing job screenings for, or we're doing our demos on our main website of like buying a house, or like getting a free estimate for your windows and doors company. It's not the first impression you want to make. But I was and there's all these different things, just like you can adjust on a radio, the treble, the different sound of the car. Like you can do all of that with AI voices, but it takes a lot of testing to like nail it down. And even if you read documentation and you follow the documentation, sometimes you apply the settings and you run it, and it's like the documentation doesn't line up with the reality of my actual experience testing it. So it is a lot of hours and a lot of time to testing. I would say where we're going with Insta here, as a small team right now, is I need to unleash more people that can really help out to test all of these different variants, right? We were talking about a great summer intern project would be being able to unleash the test platform capability to other people besides just me being able to monitor it and test it, because it's a lot of time to test it. And so that's where we're going to get exponential gains as a business by me being able to spend some time in the code to be able to let the teammates we have play around with those settings right in our platform without having to actually publish code. So we can really change it. And then we can also start to let clients select what voices they like. Our clients are pretty vocal about what voices they like. That was the stoner feedback that was what I projected, but that's exactly what the client thought too. They just didn't want to tell me those exact words. So,
yeah, it's funny. So if I'm listening and I own a small business, like last night I don't spend a lot of time watching TV, but I knew that we've been working through some of these challenges this week, and then there's all these logistics for the business and things that we're working on the sidelines. And I sat down and I saw the news, and I was like, oh, there's this company opening up a trash, like the neighboring town has this like trash provider, and they're switching to this other one, and they're like doing all these hiring fairs and career fairs. And I'm like, I'm just going to let them know, like, hey, we're a company that can help you guys automate this onboarding process. And if I'm thinking as the owner of that company, I just had this new contract, I have a volume hiring situation, I need to get a lot of people on quickly, or like the deal literally requires
the
that.
contract.
Yeah, their contract requires that, right? And so it's like, I don't want to lose the deal. You really, when you're looking at these products, it's not like the old world of like 90s Beanie Babies, whatever, where you can just go and simply find the best one, like the royal blue elephant.
Peanut, the royal blue elephant.
Yeah. He was the one you wanted because he had the highest value, because he was this color, and it was limited quantity. It was very logical, right? There was like one piece, and it was like one component you're working with, and there was a couple of things to consider. But now it's like, with these products that are out here in this voice AI SaaS space, it's like there are so many things to consider. And really, at the end of the day, I think more than ever, it becomes like when I was starting out my career, I thought mission statements were the dumbest thing in the world. I really thought they were like the fluffiest. I remember we did this SHI, big company I worked at, probably like 10,000 people now, one of the largest, I think the largest private company in the United States. We went through this exercise of, we had groups of 200 people came in, and they were like, what do you think the mission statement would be? And I'm like, this is what we're getting we're spending an hour with everyone in the company to figure this out. Now I understand why that's important, because it really is the level of service. Well, the level of service it's just a math equation. I mean, if you have investors, investors are pushing you towards short-term wins. Those short-term wins are just get the voice up and running, just figure out the solution to unblock the thing, versus, two small people on a team that's growing organically. There's less of this pressure of like making the investment team happy and making the customer happy. It's like, we need to figure out this quality of service issue to get the best voice for the best thing.
And you can be more, let me add something to that. So with early customers, when it's an organic company and you don't have to worry about as much, like, we can say whatever we want in this company. Like, no one's going to tap me and say, you shouldn't have said that, right? There's no one that's over me, paying my bills, right? So to speak, my customers. The customers are the only ones that I need to listen to. I don't need to listen to investors telling me how to do my job. However, you can also, one of the things that's worked really well at a startup of our size is being really real with the customers when things are going wrong, things need to be improved. Just let them know. Give them a heads up. I had to text a customer today to tell them, hey, we're going to be upgrading the model over the weekend. And so you're going to see some awkwardness, and it's just going to be that way. But again, it's like, you can be really real. You don't have to get stuck in communication departments to like get an approval for sending that out. And everyone understands that. Everyone understands that everything's not perfect. And so that allows me to have a relationship of trust with the customers. And over the long term, my bet is that is going to do wonders for retention and keeping them as a customer long term, because they know that you have your back and that they know that you really care, right? And so that's, to me, it just feels like the right way a human interaction and a relationship would operate. But I have to let them know a little bit more than I would like to. I don't let them know about all the tech stuff that they don't care about, but I do have to let them know sometimes when things go off the rails. But the cool thing is, in those messages from a client I just got, is like, I really want your product to succeed. I'm rooting for you. Because they have that relationship.
It's really funny, because at a going super like Jordan Peterson or like Benjamin Hardy, you are the product. We are the product. The company is the product. And so you have this situation in which the mission statement actually is the genetic DNA of what that is. And culture is two-sided, right? There's the internal company culture, whatever. And then there's also the client-facing culture. And I think a lot of companies that you and I have been at, and they were led by really good, competent, smart people. I will say a couple of the times we've been at companies together, because we've been working in a week or two, it'll be a decade since you and I have been working together in various situations. And yeah, I know. The thing is, we've worked in situations where people are like, no, don't tell them that. We'll just pretend that's not happening, or just kind of sweep it under the rug until we can.
My younger self was totally like that. And you learn over time the fallacy of sweeping it under the rug, or puffing yourself up to look bigger than you are. When people are like, how many clients do you have? Like, you tell them exactly how many you have. Like, number one, you do, like, if they're scared of that, then they're probably not going to be a good fit for you either way, close to the end of the finishing line of the deal, right? If they're later on the bell curve. But just telling people where you're at, people are willing to give you an unbelievable amount of grace and patience if they know what's really going on.
Yeah, and that's why I think, these videos are such an important component of this, right? Like, there are a lot of companies in this AI voice space. A lot of them, you and I have met. We've been at trade shows or conferences, for better or for worse, where we get put next to these people, and they're great. They're kind. Many of them have taken investment. Many of them, I can feel it when I'm with them or we're talking to the founders, where it's like just the level of anxiety and urgency. And then there are some that are like, they're realizing there's other people in this space. No one's figured it out to a mass market degree where like they have that level of service. And I forget the point I wanted to make, but go ahead.
You just have more. I would say this. It's not that investment, it can't work with investment. And I'm definitely not anti-investment. I know that you're not. We are for the wrong reasons, right? Like, I've seen the great parts of investment, and I've seen bad parts of investment. The best investors are the ones where they really align with your mission, right, of what you do. That's why the mission is important. They have to align at a core level when everything goes wrong or things aren't going right. If you're on the same page of what the bigger end game is, it's way more likely to get the same grace from your investors versus I'm just looking at a P&L statement and I want to know exactly how much money that we're bringing in. Some investors are like that, and that's okay. I think then it makes more sense to take the money at a later stage of your business where you're basically using the investment more or less as a bank loan because you've already figured it out. You're already maybe profitable. You're putting coal on the fire at that point to just scale up your business and maybe get some of those investors to open up some doors and connections. However, I'm not anti-investment. I want to put that out there. It's just that sometimes investors, where founders, and we've experienced this on teams, we've seen CEOs that we've reported to, where investment starts to derail a startup's progress is when, like you mentioned earlier, the short-term results that they have to report to the board, you'll see founders get nervous and worrying. They founder and they derail from their mission statement to try to get those quick wins that to make it look good to the board or in their newsletter, but it's not actually building any enterprise value for the company underneath the scenes. Like it's literally just appeasing people that are giving them money. And that's no way to operate a business, right? So it all comes back down to vulnerability and an honest relationship with the people that you're in business with, whether they're your investors, your customers, letting them know exactly what's going on. One of the former investors that I used to work with, I love one of his lines, which he said, "Mike, I'd rather have tons of 10-minute conversations with you rather than a 2-hour conversation with you once a month. I'd rather you like get on the phone with me, tell me what you're struggling with, be really real so I can help you out. Maybe it's possible I can help you. Maybe I can just hold space for you and listen." Anyway, kind of derailed a little bit from probably where you were going with it, but did want to just mention investment can be good. It just can be a huge distraction if it's not mission based.
This is a larger conversation for a different day because I do want to touch on the 4 pillars that make the product so people can understand the complexity and what the challenges are in the space. Even if they have another service provider and they're experiencing issues, like maybe they can have a little more empathy for what's going on. But just to put a pin in this and talk about it later, I'm not overtly opposed to investment. I am against the majority of venture capital investing as it exists. I've seen it. Most companies are not on a good trajectory. 9 out of 10 companies will fail. Like there are very few that are pointed in a good direction. And so what I've seen investment do more times than not is, number one, build a solution that the board and investors want, not what customers want. Because the age-old saying that comes from the Bible, you cannot serve 2 masters. And that is the issue that I see in the venture capital space. The other one is a lot of companies get investment and it just accelerates their trajectory towards an early demise and the reality is organic is always better than anything that's artificial. And so when you have to have artificial growth, right? It's like putting nitrous oxide in a car versus building the engine, right? So it can handle a turbocharger, supercharger, whatever the amount of horsepower capacity. It's like, I'm just going to strap this thing on as a quick win. You end up blowing stuff up doing that. And it's like never good. It's the same with relationships too, right? It's like, you don't want to just jump to third base. Like there are things you do to get to a certain, so it's like organic growth to me is always the best solution. You would prefer to send your kids to college and have them have some responsibility in paying for it or feel like they were involved in paying for it, some part of it, if not the whole thing. Maybe their tuition, because you want them to value it. So when people get free money, it does make them do things that are in misalignment. And what the board and the investors and customers desire, those are all very different things. And then you have the founder. So I'm not huge on investment because I've seen it do more harm than good, but I do want to get back on the tracks and talk about what are the 4 components at a super high level, because now we don't have a ton of time left. What are the 4 pieces that make up this service? And, should customers that are using these kind of products have empathy? And are we in an AI bubble? Are we getting out of it soon? What's going on?
So I don't think I wouldn't say it's a bubble. Maybe when I think about a bubble, I think about it in terms of the stock market. But in terms of the value that this technology is going to add to the world, we're definitely not in a bubble. Like we're at a very exciting stage. These assistants, they make so much sense for companies. like that 24/7 availability, right? You can handle 99,000 concurrent calls at the same time, that's a crazy scale. I mean, I hope we get to that point where we're there. However, we're not in a bubble in terms of AI voice assistants eating the customer service world and this applicant screening world, first impression world that we currently live in. Like, we are at the very, very, very beginning stages where we are just getting in with companies that CEOs, COOs, technologists who understand how this is going to be a game changer, and they understand the productivity and the bottom line savings that this technology will add. So we're not on a bubble there. However, it's like I was saying earlier, it's very, very much wild, wild west. You have to do a lot of testing. All the companies that we're working with, right? Let's go back through those components again. We've got Twilio, again, that's very established for SMS, and they handle the actual call. The voice call itself is done through Twilio. They've been around for 10 plus years. I think they might even be a public company at this point. Very, very stable. They're also in a highly regulated environment, telecom. You have to do a lot nowadays to register a phone number to make sure it's not sending out spam text the person's opted in. But let's talk about the second part, which is speech to text. Very, very new technology. It's been around, obviously, in a while. Everyone's called their bank, and they've gone through, those all of those phone menus that are a little bit subpar, or they're the sub menus that make you want to just press 0 as soon as you can, so you talk to a human instantly, right? But that's a very new space. There's so much money right now being put into making that better. So we really are the beneficiaries of that bubble, so to speak, because you've got Amazon and Google who've been in this space for a long time, with transcription, right? And now you have all these other startups that are trying to get those words and really trying to filter out the background noise that an applicant has on the call. So I would say we benefit from that bubble because so much money is being put into it. All, like you were saying earlier with investment, everybody is rushing to make the best possible experience. We are benefiting from that competition. Now, where we don't benefit is when they release a new thing and regression wise, it ends up impacting our transcription. So we have to be on top of that. So it's a lot of QA. What I really get at here is you can build your own orchestration, right? All of these things are available. There's no secrets here. All of these services are available. You can look up a blueprint on how to do it, right? However, where it's time intensive is the testing of models that are changing all the time, different latency speeds, things like that. And it's also just the quality also as well, and making sure all of these things play nicely together. Because you really have to get under the hood again if you want to make it a really, really good experience. And it took us months to get to the point of perfecting a voice in terms of making.
What are in really short term, like layman's terms, what are the 4 pillars?
So you've got, the 4 pillars are for us with this call assistant is you need a voice provider. We use SMS as well for instant engagement. That's Twilio. The second one is speech to text. So that is, again, transcribing. The third one is the brain. What is the actual brain of taking what the applicant says and actually like doing something with it to give to the voice? That's what we call as the LLM, right? That's what everyone knows as ChatGPT. It's the same way you would go into, say you copy a friend's text message. You're like, I don't know how to respond to this message. Can you give me a response, right? That is what that is doing. That's the brain, the LLM. The fourth component is what's called text to speech. So that's now taking whatever the brain gives as like, this is what you should say to the applicant. And that's actually putting it into one of those voices. And that's the part that's like very much a branding exercise, because that is the ultimate experience that the customer experiences. That's what they hear on the recordings. So, and then as a good orchestrator, as a good conductor, you have to make sure all these things are happening all at the same time. Because if you have awkward silence or your voice assistant's cutting people off, there's so many nuances to like making it a smooth experience. And we are still, as a business, learning at how to improve it. We're using some stuff, higher level APIs. Like, I'm excited to go a little bit lower level over the next couple months and really get into the weeds on pauses and inflections and things like that. That's just going to make it, I mean, just like a killer experience. But as a small team, we've got limited resources. We got to get the ball rolling. And so it's only going to get better. But those are the four things. So you've got Twilio, you've got speech to text, you've got the LLM, and then you have text to speech.
Yeah, I think that's good for this video. It is really crazy though, just from a, my background's in psychology, and I don't have a ton of gifts, but one of the gifts I have is like just analyzing people and conversations and body language. All these like neuro small things like stick out to me, like just even a twitch on someone's eyebrow or whatever when they're communicating, just to get an idea of if they like something, if they don't like something. I think it's coming from my background and then starting in sales, it's like it just is something I pay attention to. And so it is really wild how so much of these conversations that, because I go in QA a decent amount of them, and I also demonstrate it to people that are interested in purchasing the product. And so it's these small like pauses, or when they go faster, when they go slower, how they do these inflections that really make up so much of the underlying conversation. If there's not time for someone to talk, if there's not a long enough pause, like all of these things that we innately do as humans that we take for granted, it's like the call, like so much of the success of the calls is really just predicated on that, on being a good listener and having responsibility, your ability to respond being high. And like, it's just surprising to me that it's these little things. It's not like magic words or some secret thing.
That's right. The words, if I had to say one last thing, is, and we've seen this, we've been blown away by how these AI assistants handle anything that's thrown at them, right? Like I had my dad testing a job position, and they asked about a uniform. He said he didn't have clothes. And the way that the AI voice assistant responded was just unbelievable, right? We've had veterans go on and say that they're in the Navy, and unprompted, the AI system will say, "Thank you for your service." Like I didn't prompt that. That's sort of temperature setting, right? But I want to double click on what you said. That's not the problem. We know how good ChatGPT is. We know how good the brains are, whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, you name it. Where the nuance is the orchestration of the timing of the call, the pauses, the inflections. That is what is going to that's what's going to win the day and the customer experience at the end of the day, where an applicant gets off and they're like, I didn't even know I was talking with an AI, except they disclosed that up front at the call.
The thing
that is very, very Wild West right now.
The thing that's so interesting about that is it really comes down to the person. Like, we're an AI product that really comes down to the person leading the company, making the most difference for a client. Because if you're just motivated by short-term gains and getting a paycheck and whatever, which, we saw what that did in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s of moving jobs around and making less than wise short-term decisions that didn't lead to long-term outcomes that were great. There's a lot of companies in that space, but it's like, because there's this obsession over making sure that experience is great for every customer, we've built tools, and we're looking at building teams around internally analyzing these things, so that it's like, if there's like even the smallest percentage decrease in passing rates or whatever, it's like we get notified right away that a model could have changed, and like tweaking it. And it's like, it takes the right person to even care about those things, because like they're not necessarily a one-to-one on, if you already won the customer, it's like, how does that pay? That's not going to yield more money or whatever, unless you look at it from a churn perspective. And so much of that comes down to this obsession over the client, and believing and creating a solution that, like, you really, Alex Ramosi, I was listening to a video of his yesterday, and he's like, the number one thing in sales when I talk to my people is like, you have to believe that this thing is going to like tangibly make this customer's life or business better in some way. And I've worked at companies as a salesperson where it's like, it's been hard to convince yourself that, because the product's just not great. So it's like, our product is the people, our product is the team. And it's funny because it's just dawned on me now. The other big company that you and I started and worked at for nearly 3 years, we were doing natural language processing as a huge selling point of that whole product, right? It was like an HR employee engagement thing. And how weird that we find ourselves in a similar space of selling to people in this HR space, and we're doing this like like new version of machine learning and whatever. It's like, it's so funny. It's like just a rebrand of a totally different set of services.
It's a voice version of what we were doing with texting, scoring text to see emotion, right? But it's also so much more than that, because again, we're dealing with human beings that are dynamic, and they're throwing curveballs at us. We've got sound in the background. There's a lot of moving things at play. But I do believe that it's a balancing act, right? Because as a business, you got to get some traction. You got to get data on the platform. And I think it's really good, but you constantly have to be improving when no one's looking. Like, you have to be obsessed with those details of making the orchestration better. Even though for a customer, it might just be good enough for right now, it's not good enough long term. You got to constantly make it better and improve. And we're learning from all these conversations that are going on. But what are you doing with those learnings?
It's interesting. And that goes back, and I'll end with this. Everyone is improving, right? Like, everyone is trying to progress towards something. Sometimes that's just making more money. Sometimes that's actually improving the product, but all of that comes down to the personalities leading the company. And so I think that these videos are so important. They can be uncomfortable for you and I to make and record. They're not the most convenient. We like to work on the product. We like customers coming in, talking to them. I'd rather spend my time doing other things, but I force us to put this on the calendar because I think it's so important for people to get a glimpse into, not that you and I are special or like we're holier than thou or whatever. I just want people that are aligned with the way that we think to realize there's a company that maybe thinks similar to them, that's dedicated to them, that's whatever. Because I always think that that's better than a nameless, faceless company, of which there are many in this space providing solutions. Because how you decide to build the company as the founder is, the product ends up being such a reflection of who you are. Out of what is the verse? It's like, you will know them by their fruit, right? Like, that is this situation. Like, everything flows out of who we are. And so if you're obsessed with your customers, if you're obsessed with building and creating and making things better and better, I think the downstream impact will always be felt by clients, employees, and all that. So I think with that, let's end, unless there's anything else you want to add. Otherwise, we'll see our people in the next video.
And I just wanted to say, I think these videos are helpful because it helps us to further also reaffirm our mission in this, right? I realize things that are in my head on how I think the mission is for the company, right? Because we actually haven't written our mission statement. That's, to my knowledge, unless it's buried on a Google Drive doc. You and I we've known each other for so long, and we know how each other thinks. And we both, the reason why we're partnered on this is because we click yin and yang together. But this is helping us also talk about our mission statement. There's a couple of things that we just uncovered on this. So I think it's valuable for us to constantly talk about that, and also how we're actually living it.
I think it's important when you have major product market fit, then you can start tailoring that to who your base is, at least in that part of the startup bell curve. And so I think we're at a good place. Like, I don't want to nail it down before we're too ready. But again, yeah, like you said, I'm a communicator seller, you're a builder creator, and both of us in our respective verticals or silos rather, we are so obsessed with, generally speaking, I sometimes get this wrong, others over self. And so if you have that mindset that the customer first, I want this to work for them first, I'll take a paycheck second, this has to be the best thing ever, I want their business to succeed before I ask for money. When you have that mindset, I think it becomes a lot easier to start crafting a company that's set up for long-term success when you're thinking about customers, your employees, and how you want to treat them, and all of these other things before you get to, okay, what are my needs? Yep. We can talk about empty cup and all that stuff on another podcast.
If you're not adding, one of your favorite lines, if you're not adding value, you are
taking it away. Yeah. So thank you, Steve Z, for that quote that I stole from him at SHI, but it's still a good one nonetheless.